programs. Sometimes they're changing personnel. Sometimes they're changing location, and we just add and delete, and we go from there. Um, we do have, before we get into the cultural reverence, we have two individuals that are new. It's Eldon Jack from Cass School District. I think he's there. And he's the executive director for student services. And the other one is Kendra Emblinton from Duchesne School District. I don't know if Kendra is there. Is she on view here? She's not. Well, Eldon, could you just introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself, and we do have this. This is our monthly meeting with our Title VI folks. We also have other agencies that are invited, and this is an open meeting. We used to have this in person before, but after COVID, we start to use the technology, teleconferencing, so that really helps because of the travel, cut down on travel for everybody, and that means that they save a little bit of funding and so on and so forth. But this really satisfies everybody, and you see the agenda there, and we have two pieces each month. We have a professional development being offered, and the other piece is just basically it's presenters or updates. So today we don't have any presenters, but we do have updates on this. And next month in May is going to be our last meeting for the year. Then we'll start up again in September. So that's basically the lay of the land. I'll also send you a master with all the contact information for our Title VI, so you have a pretty good idea what that looks like. Um, and and I guess we'll go from there. So go ahead and Eldon, you might introduce yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here with all of you. I'm excited to join your group. Um, and I know I've met a few of you here and there. Brenda, I know I've met you, and excited to be here in the group with you all. So I grew up in San Juan County. Um, my family grew up in the Four Corners area, and I came to school at Utah State University and have stayed here ever since, here in Cache County. Um, I've been an elementary teacher, a literacy coordinator, and an elementary principal. And just the last 4 years, I've been doing student interventions and accommodations and educational equity for the school district. And they've just kind of realigned some responsibilities. And I'm excited that I get to take Title VI and have that be a part of what I do. I'm really grateful for Utah State University and Danny Piper and others up there who work with us. And so just really grateful to be with you all. Thank you for the warm invite, Dr. Foster. I sure appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And is Kendra on from Duchesne School District? She's the new Amanda Jenks. They had a changeover in, I guess, personnel. So if she's not on, just to kind of explain, Eldon, that what we do here is that we kind of follow the protocol of a traditional point of view in terms of we add an item, which is the cultural reverence. Cultural reverence will, it's a really a general term that we use. It could be offered in a poem, something they're working on. It could be a project. It could be a prayer. It could be, something culturally, and we give reverence to that approach, and then we'll go from there. So we'll have this every month, and it's always on the agenda. So I asked Eddie if he could do the cultural reverence this morning, and then we'll go from there.
Oh, yeah, det happen. She Eddie Calamity and she tapahanist Asian slot with it in Bassistin. Liz London that she look Idasanala cut out and then good morning, my name's Eddie Calamity. My clans are Zuni Edgewater, born for Bitterwater. My maternal grandfather is the Minigoat clan, and my paternal grandfather is of the Reed clan. You know, that's one thing that I've, ever since I was a little kid, was taught to always know who you are. And the other thing that whenever I visit my grandma's, I used to be really shy, and she would say, "Don't you know that your footprint starts from here?" So I think that that's one thing that I've always remember, to know where I come from and where everything started for me. And I think that some of the things that have happened in past have really um, tripped me up at times. There was a time that I was not proud of who I was. And one thing that I always tell my students when I meet with my students as I work with my middle schooler and high schooler is, if they're Navajo, what's your clan? If you don't know it, let's find out what your clans are. And some of them are so excited, says, "This is what I found out." And says, "Okay, always remember that because that's who you are as a human being, to know where everything starts." And I think the other thing that really, I guess, came to light for me is our ancestors, Nihikasana. Whenever we pray or whenever we address a crowd or a meeting, we always acknowledge our ancestors because without them, we wouldn't be here. And some of the things that they have gone through and fought for, has put us where we are today to be able to um, coexist with everybody else. And that's one thing that I'm really grateful for is my ancestors. And anytime we wear our turquoise, we're allowing our ancestors know who we are, that we're one of them. And when my daughter got married this past summer, I gave he's from the other side of the country, Maine or Massachusetts, sorry. And we did a traditional ceremony, and I gave him a turquoise necklace just to let our ancestors know that he's become part of our family. So that's really been something that I've tried to get back to my roots and really be proud of who I am. And I guess I would like to finish by just saying a prayer for us and for our students that we work with. Shije ashidhango nikadonjin nani kai ba hitanitsan di kado nakada altato hadishin nikhendanishi achin nakachin bishindilishi ba hitanitsan don kudondan ni kato lehlo na ahegi nakabigitan itan lehlo nakachin no nihitso kedo nihinalikedo de achin nakabiginan zildo nakabigitan itan lehlo jano ben sekesto bits isto bits zinin jano de kato lehlo don hito no not ani dan ledo not ani dan nakan dal nashim bishkhalno no njita tez itan lehlo hadishi denzinegi bemikinan zildo lehlo ekodo ben danini kato I see by hitanitsan nikado 네, 이제 다할지 바시다니 좀 وشهد تهديشين نخين لاهي باشيتاني 좀 더 되니 بجاء النشطة دالش Amen.
Yeah, Eddie, that's good. I like that. You know, that good prayer, good day, good sunshine. So, well, we have an agenda. You see it there. We'll have Dustin to do our professional development today, and then we'll go through the updates. There's a few items there that we'd like to review. And of course, our Navajo language class and the government class, that's going to be an overview from Clayton. I know that, you know, especially for those seniors, they like to have that appear on their transcript as ASAP. So I think Clayton's going to bring us up to date on that. And the last item there before the adjournment is the report from the Urban Indian Center too. So we'll go from there. So Dustin.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let me see. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Oh, perfect. Hey, so I've been getting questions on this lately. I just want to thank Eddie again for that cultural reverence for his prayer. I really appreciate those words. Like it really, I think, goes into this topic this morning on the Indian Child Welfare Act, and why it's important to know who you are, and you know, I like the way you said that. You know, this is where your footprint starts. That's gonna stick with me for a long time, I think. So thank you for those words on that. You know, last year the Supreme Court issued a decision in Holland v. Bracking. It was a challenge to the Indian Child Welfare Act out of Texas, and it was a victory, you know, for Indian country, and it was a decisive victory. There was 7-2 in that vote there in the Supreme Court. You know, a lot of states with good relationships with their tribes, they all went in on what we call an amicus brief, and went in together and shared their thoughts on the Indian Child Welfare Act. And Utah was the one that drafted that, and 26 other states jumped in on it and signed it. And I read through it, I went through it. It was a well written document, and I had to have had some effect on the Supreme Court because it had everything that we needed to have in it. So we're appreciative of that in this state. But you know, I wanted to talk about this because there may be students, you know, in your school districts, within your classes, that may be not living with their families, or maybe are living in foster care of some sort. Something may have happened to their parents, and you know, they had to be removed from their home. Or you might have students that are adopted and gone through the adoption process following the Indian Child Welfare Act guidelines and things. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. You know, this was passed in 1978, and a lot of people want to know why. But you know, it was really to establish basic requirements to protect Native American children from removal from their homes and communities. And that's important, not just from their homes, but removal from their communities, right? These protections are essential, you know, especially after centuries of many attempts to destroy Native people through genocide or massacres, forced assimilation. And even in some cases, you know, people made allegations of legalized kidnapping during the boarding school era, you know, where these kids were removed against their will from their family's home, sometimes from their parents' arms, you know, and sent thousands of miles away, you know, to be educated, to be assimilated into a different culture. Uh, you know, Native people are also deeply overrepresented within family systems, family regulation systems, where unfamiliar cultural practices and poverty were consistently misused to tear apart Native families and communities, and place Native children with non-Indian families, probably from other religions, different Christian religions, and that were different from this child's culture. We look, before the Indian Child Welfare Act, we started to realize, I think, as a country, that about a third of Native American and Alaskan Native children were taken from their homes and removed from their homes through welfare agencies or even private adoptions. But 85% of those children that were removed were placed outside of family or community, and with people that didn't know them, right? They're outside their native communities. The Indian Child Welfare Act, it was passed to change, these policies. It was passed to change these placements, to make sure that these kids had a better chance of survival, of moving forward, of moving on. Look at this slide. We're looking at high numbers of children being removed. 75 to 80% of Indian families had at least one child removed at the time, right? Without consideration, where their placement is done without consideration of tribal beliefs, tribal practices. And placement didn't consider the importance of an indigenous culture before, and so we have to be aware of those things, and how when we discuss children. Why then? It was to protect indigenous children, protect their interest. I've said this 100 times, in these trainings, that Indian isn't just a racial status, it's a legal status. And with that legal status comes, certain rights and privileges, even a property interest at that. If you're Native, you may qualify for a scholarship. If you're Native, you may qualify to get a home site lease where you're from. If you're Native, you may qualify for health care through the Indian Health Services. There are privileges and rights associated with being Indian. And so when these children are kept away from these things, you're actually, you're depriving them of an interest, a property interest, and include that a cultural interest in who they are. This also promotes stability in Indian families, right? And protects the interest of a tribe and its own children, right? During the legislative debate over the Indian Child Welfare Act, it was said that the greatest resource for any tribe in the United States are its children, right? Its children determine whether or not there will be a tribe in the future. And so, not surprisingly, but a lot of social service agencies and adoption agencies, they see the Indian Child Welfare Act as a gold standard. They know from experience that when you place a child that's been removed from his home, if you place that child with family, that placement, the odds of that placement being successful dramatically increase. Not just easy on a nice little slope, but exponentially increase. When that kid knows the people who he's going to live with now, and he knows that these people love him. These family placements are important, nationwide, but it was the Indian Child Welfare Act that really put that in legislative language. And these are, I listed 3 of these preferences, but if we look I think the next slide will expand on what happens if after the 3rd preference. What it does, in any adopted placement of an Indian child, it says it establishes a preference. And look at this in this language: absent of good cause to the contrary, right? So if you don't have a good reason not to follow this this preference system, then this is the preference system you should follow. There are placements out there where that child may not be better off with his family. There's always exceptions to rules. And so, but that would be good cause, right? That would be if you can show that maybe this child's extended family or immediate family or alcoholics also, or maybe they don't hold jobs or they don't have the living space. If you can show good cause why an Indian child shouldn't be placed with his family, then you should show it. But otherwise, this is the priority that you should follow. If you look at number 4 on the bottom, it says the Institution for Children approved by an Indian tribe or operating Indian organization, which is a program supposed to meet Indian child's needs, right? But also, if we can't satisfy these preferences, then we're not. This Indian child will go into that general adoption program that places kids within that state. But you should remember to follow these preferences, and except in cases where there's good cause shown that you shouldn't. So we just want people to be aware of that. One of the big things that was in the news lately, was just Brackeen v. Holland case. And I told you just earlier in this training that tribes did very well on it. And what happened was there was a couple of non-native families, right? Non-native couples, and they were trying to adopt native kids, and Brackeen v. Holland specifically, the child that was going to be adopted was eligible for enrollment in both the Navajo Nation and with the Cherokee Nation. When the adoption process started, the tribes were notified. Okay. And when tribes are notified, they're asked if they want to intervene or if they just want to be they can intervene and be a party, or they just can be included and participate in these hearings. I understand it can be a scary time, right? When you're looking for a permanent placement and then there's, something comes up where that placement might be interfered with. And in this case, for this family, it was the Indian Child Welfare Act. And, they got really nervous about it. And when the tribes were notified, and as the tribes were deciding whether or not they wanted to participate or intervene in this hearing, a lot of law firms contacted these non-native families, and they wanted to take up their case because they're looking for the right case to challenge to do away with the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so Gibson and Dunn picked up the Brackeen family, and and said, hey, we'll represent you for free. Basically, just let us take your case. Gibson Dunn is a law firm that doesn't do family law. They do natural resource law, and they work for companies that contract with tribes to extract natural resources from federal lands. And you're wondering why they would interfere in something or involve themselves in something like this. Well, the whole Indian status, the whole idea of being legally Indian, can be a barrier, an obstacle for people that want to access federal lands that are Indian reservations. And if they can't access those lands because there's a sovereign government on those lands and has jurisdiction over those lands and regulates those lands, if you can tear apart the Indian identity, you can tear apart the tribal identity and do away, with tribal governments altogether. And that was the fear, and that's what tribal attorneys were seeing when they saw this case go forward, especially in the arguments that were attacking the Indian Child Welfare Act. So before, before the Navajo Nation or the Cherokee Nation made their decision on whether or not to intervene or participate in the hearing, um, the um, the the Brakeens picked up representation, and the both tribes, the Navajo Nation and the Cherokee Nation, both decided, hey, this placement looks good. We're okay with this placement. It looks like the Brakeens are okay with in having the child enrolled and doing what they can to so that the child will know he's Navajo. We couldn't find, a better placement than this. We feel like this is a good placement. But even with that, even though they had the go ahead on the adoption, um, that information was stricken from the court record, and the Brackeen's attorneys, Gibson and Dunn, end up filing the Brackeen-Holland case in the Supreme Court. And without that in the record, right, without anything in the record showing evidence that the tribes had approved the adoption or at least support the adoption, um, the Supreme Court was left with a record that was basically cherry picked between the judge there and the Gibson Dunn attorneys on what information they wanted to have go through these Texas courts up to the Supreme Court. So it got really scary. They challenged a couple of things. They challenged uh, the federal government's authority to even involve itself with Indian children. They challenged it on an equal protection basis. A lot of these cases that were challenging the Indian Child Welfare Act, they were challenging equal protection challenges based on the adoptive parents, like the non-Indian parents saying, "I'm not allowed to adopt because of my race," and those weren't winning arguments. This case, Brackeen v. Holland, they said the Indian Child Welfare Act is unconstitutional because it's based on the child's race, and you're causing him to jump through way more hurdles than any other child in the system just because he's Indian, because of his race as Indian. And they really wanted to push Indian being a racial status primarily and only versus a legal status. There's an unlawful delegation of power. They challenge are saying, hey, you can't make states enforce federal laws like this, especially when child, foster systems, usually the policy is states have jurisdiction over that. And something called an anti-commandeering challenge. This says that a federal government can't require states to adopt a federal law or use state resources, funds, or personnel to enforce a federal law. Okay, and the state of Texas was saying, you're making us do this. You're making us expend our money and to enforce a child placement law that isn't ours. And so this is a commandeering challenge on this. Why was this important? Why was this case important? I love the way Joseph Singer put it. He said the court's decision could have revolutionary, catastrophic consequences. There are hundreds of treaties with Indian nations that are still in effect. If you can't treat Indian nations as sovereigns, if you can't treat Indians differently from non-Indians, does that make all those treaties unconstitutional, right? Because we've talked about this before. These treaties are based upon government-to-government agreements. These aren't government to race agreements. Treaties are government to government agreements. And if you destroy the legal identity of being Indian, then almost the entirety of Title 25, this United States code that defines the federal relationship with tribal governments, would dissolve. It would go away. It would be that's 200 years of law that could just be flushed down the toilet because one decision, if we got one Supreme Court to see Indians different than other Supreme Court justices have since our foundation. And it was hard. It was hard to really gain support for tribes, right? Because all people see are a child that needs to be placed and a family that wants a child, and the big bad tribes are getting away with that, right? But the photos, all you see um, are photos of non-Indians, uh, photos of non-Indians who feel that their rights are being challenged. You don't see the pictures of the Indian children. That may be because they're minors, but you don't see pictures of the birth families, the native families that have decided to place their children in adoption. You don't see pictures of tribal leaders, of tribal communities in that. And this ends up being, the public ends up seeing this as a battle between, big bad tribal government versus, non-Indian family that can't produce kids naturally and on their own, and the poor Indian child that's being banged around in the middle, all because the tribe won't let this happen. But we forget that the whole purpose of the Indian Child Welfare Act was to look after the best interests of the children in the very beginning. And it's set up to do that, right? Some people ask, well, what if this is a biracial family where you have a non-Indian parent and an Indian parent, and the child is removed? If ICWA says let's place this child with family first, to whose family gets preference, right? Really, it's family. Okay, that's what's important, the immediate family. And that could be the non-Indian side or the Indian side, depending on who's able to care for this child. The first placement should be family, wherever that may be. So when this was all up in the air and we didn't know what was going to happen with Brackeen v. Holland, a lot of tribes, a lot of states stepped up to support the Indian Child Welfare Act. Just listening to the voices of their tribes within their state and saying, hey, if this doesn't get through the Supreme Court, we're going to be up the creek a little bit. What can we do to work together? And so a lot of states started consulting with the tribes within their state, and they basically adopt a state version of the Indian Child Welfare Act. They name it different things, sometimes like Indian Family Protection Act and things like that. And the tribes here in Utah, with the help of some state agencies, got together and they drafted proposed legislation to have a state version of the Indian Child Welfare Act here in Utah. It had the support of all 8 tribes. It had support of all the relevant 8 state agencies. And, people were challenging it. The state legislature was challenging it. I should note that it had the support of the lieutenant governor and the governor and the attorney general's office. And still the state legislature used it as an attempt to show the citizens of Utah that the state legislature was still, I don't know, extreme far right and Republican, as if no one knew, right? They decided not to do it. And in fact, right before it came to vote, minutes before it came to vote, the committee, the Rules Committee, was supposed to vote on it. They made amendments to HB 40 that were amended so far that most of what they had put in there wouldn't even satisfy federal law. It wouldn't satisfy some state law. It showed that they had absolutely no idea what Indian law consisted of and what Indian policies even existed. It was a little, I was almost embarrassed for them, that those amendments they put forward, but it did not sit well with the tribes at all, when they did that, and with, I think what did they say? What did they say about this? Let me pull out Darren Perry. Darren Perry, when he made those changes, he called those changes offensive, And, and he was like, and you're just doing it hours before the voting on the bill. That wasn't right. And this is him quoted in the Salt Lake Times. Our Tribune says it was the 11th hour. We didn't know about it. Anything that happens like that, where you feel like you have a deal, and then right at the last second it changes, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, we can't really give our opinion on this. And, he really bothered him. He goes, I think that's enough feeling that we think it's done a little bit underhanded to not give us the appropriate time to respond. But honestly, I don't know the legislators, he said. It really caught people off guard. I think everyone that was watching in those committee hearings and listening and reading about, the writing really was on the wall. And the our state legislators that support bills like this and support Supreme Court decisions that challenge in tribal sovereignty, they use this as a time to posture and to really push that far right agenda, and its attacks on Native sovereignty. In the end, um, the Supreme Court, voted to preserve the Indian Child Welfare Act. All those attacks on congressional power, right? The court said Congress's power to legislate with respect to Indians is well established and broad. It's been described as a plenary power, an all-encompassing power, that Congress has. Now the Supreme Court, said, hey, it's not unlimited, um, but Congress does have this power, and we've established that. And they also looked at the anti-commandeering challenge and said, you know what? Hey, if there's parts of the Indian Child Welfare Act states that we want you to enforce, you know what? Sometimes the federal government can do that. We can make states do that. And they said that's just how preemption works. So we change things up. That's the whole definition of preemption. But the Supreme Court didn't address equal protection or any of the non-delegation issues. The reason why they didn't do it was that they said at this point in the hearing, none of the parties have any standing, meaning you're not even affected by this right now, right? Your adoption went through. You weren't prohibited from adopting, so you can't do your equal protection and non-delegation challenges. We're not even going to consider these because they're not even at issue here. You have no standing. So are there going to be other cases in the future where they actually have standing, where they actually can find clients with equal protection non-delegation issues? Absolutely. They're looking for those cases right now. So states have to really, and tribes have to be on the lookout to respond to those things. Again, I share this with Title VI mainly because you may have students in foster care. You may have students that need a cultural connection because they're removed from the family and community and people that know them well, at least culturally. And these children will need to know what resources are available to them and how to access them. And, this is a traumatic experience for people to be removed from home. As a judge, it's the worst thing that I ever have to do is remove children from home. I always want to make sure that there's a reunification option in the future and that these parents can take advantage of it and that it's feasible. Because children love their parents and they want to be with them. And even for me, as an adoptive parent, I understood that. This is me right here, if you couldn't recognize me. That's my wife. And then this is my oldest daughter, my second oldest daughter, my oldest son, and my second oldest son. And all four of my children are adopted. And all four of them went through the ICWA process. And it was scary. There was times where I was nervous about our court system and how it would work. I get that. I get those feelings. And let me tell you, for one of our children, we were there for the birth. And the birth mom was having the baby, and her family was in the waiting room, and we were in the waiting room, and we were sitting with the birth dad. He was getting lasers, lasers shooting from the family's eyes because birth mom was only 14 and he was 17, and they wanted to kill him, so we sat by him and tried to keep them separate and nice. But when our son was born, we walked into that room and I saw that little baby, and he was just like the most beautiful person I had ever seen. And the first thing that entered my mind was, this girl's going to change her mind. She's not going to want to go through with the adoption. And in my heart of hearts, I was like, I get it. I get it. I get it why this child probably needs to be raised by his family, by his parents. And he ended up coming out C-section, so the birth mom had to stay in the hospital for 5 days, and he was in the hospital with her for 5 days, and we didn't go by there um, and interfere with that process. My wife and I, as we walked around St. Louis, um, we understood that this girl could change her mind, and that we were okay with that. And we saw how beautiful that baby was, and we saw how loving his birth parents were, and we were like, if this is her decision that we shouldn't adopt, then we're good. We feel good about this. But on that fifth day, when she signed the papers, and she had her a guardian ad litem appointed to her, someone who would represent her interest. That guardian came to us that day and said, she still wants you to adopt her son. And we're like, okay, and we couldn't be more happy about that. And he's been a blessing in our lives, and he's a wonderful child. All my children are. I'm really lucky. I'm lucky that I was blessed with 4 children, and that there was a process in place that would allow me to raise these kids with beliefs similar to mine, and to raise them with the knowledge of their people, their cultures, and and really make sure that they have access to all those resources that can benefit them. And I have no complaints about my kids. And I urge you all to support Stephanie Benali with Utah Foster Care, and work within your school districts and those parents and those families that need children placed in the right way, in a good way. And I'll end my presentation on that, but I'm open to any questions if you have any.
Dustin, this is Brenda. I have a question. So
Okay.
what happens when there's like a grandparent that's not native, and her son passes and the mother gets custody? Does Utah have like grandparents' rights for visitation?
There are grandparent rights here in Utah. Again, the purpose of Indian Child Welfare Act isn't to separate families, right? It's to make sure that they know each other. And a grandparent could actually, especially in tribal court, could move in and request those rights be enforced, because her clans are part of what makes this child her, part of her too. So yeah, there are grandparent rights.
Because that also affects the school system, when they have rights to check out the child, but then due to whatever circumstances, the parent is saying, no, that's my child, but still they have grandparents' rights. So it just makes it confusing sometimes in the school system.
Well, in that case, if you have a parent that has custody, that parent they're totally in charge of who can check out a child. As far as visitation, and withholding a child from a grandparent, that's different than a grandparent maybe checking the child out against a parent's will or without their consent.
Hey,
What
Dustin,
about if they have dual custody?
What's that?
What if they both have custody?
Both the grandparent and the mother?
Yes.
then that's something that they should probably have written out on an agreement as part of the custody evaluation. If they need that, if the grandparent would like the court to reconsider those things, then they can go back to court and request modifications to those things. But usually a court will designate someone who's able to do that.
Hey, Dustin, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
You adopted all 4 of your kids, and all 4 of them were from Native families, yes?
Yes.
And
Well, yeah, the ICA was involved in all of them. Yes.
so my question is about the adoption fees. Adoption fees are awful. They're exorbitant. The process is painstaking. Is it different for Native families adopting Native children? Do they have to pay the same exorbitant fees that someone would say who's not adopting through a Native system?
I went my first adoption. My oldest child was done through a private adoption agency, and the fees were kind of hard. But my last 3 children, there were 2 of them were actually in custody in government custody. They weren't with they weren't with their parents anymore. They hadn't been for years, and so the Navajo Nation and the state of New Mexico kind of had a co-agreement. They were both working with each other and partnering with each other, and so they had there weren't fees associated with that other than the legal fees, right? I had to pay the court fees. I had to hire an attorney. But in cases where the tribes and the states are partnering really well, they have like a list of attorneys that do it for a flat fee. And so you know what's going on. There isn't an agency fee, a finder's fee, a placement fee. It's just whatever the court asks you for, the filing fees, and whatever an attorney charges. If you go through a tribal government who's trying to place children. And I'll be honest with you, Navajo Nation has a really good child placement program set up there. And a lot of tribes use the Navajo Nation to place their kids for them because they have a hard time placing their kids with Native families. And there isn't a wait. If you want a child, if you're willing to go through the training that Navajo Nation requires and get your foster and your foster licenses or foster to adopt licenses, if you're willing to do that, you can get placed with a child very easily through Navajo Nation. And the cost again are just CPR, food handlers permit, parenting classes. They and just time away from work to do those things. But and then the lawyer's fees.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, Dustin, I'm just kind of curious about the enrollment for their tribe.
Mhm.
Are your children from a different tribe? And when you enroll them, do you enroll them to their preference of what tribe that you want to enroll them in? Or
If
is that, you just say, well, I will waive that. We'll enroll them as Navajos.
well, I, for ours, they were already enrolled. My kids, and the only thing I'm supposed to do, I haven't done yet, is change their names on their census, on their certificate Indian blood. But if a tribe's involved, if a tribal government's involved, they will make sure that child gets enrolled, before this process is even over. Um, and then but that enrollment is usually done in their birth names, and so you'll have to change that later. But yeah, otherwise, you probably ask, you can, and like Navajo Nation, they require an open adoption. If you want to adopt Navajo children, there's a box that says I am open to, I am open to having an open adoption where parents and relatives can visit. If you don't check that box, you're not getting it. You're not even being considered, because again, they want these kids to know who their families are and their clans. And so and I'm great with it. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. And, because my kids that have communication with their birth families, they I want them to develop good relationships. They're going to have questions. They're going to ask me about adoption, why they were placed in adoption, how they ended up in my house, what were their birth parents thinking. They're going to have all these questions that I'm not going to have answers to. So hopefully, their relationships with their birth families are good enough where they can talk about that as they get older.
Yeah, that was my next question was that. Do you ever feel I mean, this is I'm getting nosy now.
It's all right.
Do you ever feel way down deep that is there ever a reverse feeling from your adopted kids? Like, I don't know, they may all of a sudden they want to go back to their, you know, not here, You
Yeah.
ever?
Yeah, and they reach that age where they throw that right back in your face too. They're not shy about telling me, you're not my real dad. And I just told them to brush their teeth or put rubber bands on their braces, right? It's like, and but we talk to them, and again, we talk very open with them. And one of my sons, he does the when I shared, he wants to go to St. Louis. He wants to meet his birth dad. He's met his birth mom a number of times, and he calls her Olivia, and he knows that that girl gave birth to him. And his birth dad's a little different. My son's autistic, and I think his birth dad is a bit on the spectrum somewhere. And he doesn't, I think it was all very overwhelming for him, when he found out he was going to be a dad. And every once in a while he'll text my wife and say, hey, is it okay if you send me a picture of Jackson? And so my wife will just, whatever Jackson's doing at that moment, she'll take a picture of him and send it to him. But he hasn't come to that point where he feels comfortable speaking with my son. And but my son's like, can we go visit them? Can I, he works in a car shop. He builds motors and races cars. So my son's really excited about this stuff. But I have to talk to my son about, I don't know if your birth dad's ready to see you. We can reach out to him and let him know. Maybe we can visit him over a weekend. You can spend some time with him. But I don't worry about wanting him to go back now as a minor. As a dad, I'm worried about, like, when he turns 18 and decides to move back to Missouri. It scares the crap out of me. Because I didn't realize what my parents were going through every summer when I took off to nerd camps for months. I didn't realize parents miss your kids that much. And even as adults, my mom will tell me she misses people. She'll miss us, and she wants us to come by, and she needs to see us and know we're doing okay. And so yeah, I have those fears. I have those fears when he's an adult that maybe he picks up and leaves, and I, selfishly I want him around. But the reality is, someone allowed me to raise him. Somebody said, raise my child for me. And my job really is to keep him safe and take care of him, and make sure that he can do those things that are important for his growth, and hopefully, if I've done my job right, he'll be able to go visit his birth dad. He'll be able to have conversations with him. He'll be able to have a good relationship, and and hopefully he'll know that I did my best, and that he's always I'll always consider him my son too.
Mm. Yeah, I really commend you guys when you guys do something like this. I got an older brother that adopted two kids also. They went basically through the same thing that you've gone through, but now his kids are adults, and they go back and forth. They visit their. I guess it's actually the girl. Her mom's still around, and the boy, her dad is still around. So it's it's when I look at them, it's a work in progress. So I think the foundation for all of this is that they're secure, they're safe, and you provide. That's just by what you're saying, plus that just observing my nephews and my niece. They it's just that they're very stable now. So it's what I think of, when I see that, it's a work in progress for everybody. And they have to, both sides have to adjust, and both sides have to uh, I guess adapt each their lifestyle. So
Yeah, I totally agree, and I didn't realize you love these kids enough, that you're willing to do whatever, even if it's against your interest, and that's hard. But hey, thank you all for the questions. Thank you all for allowing me time. I appreciate your work. You guys have a good one. I'll see ya.
all right, hey, thank you, Dustin. Hey, Dustin, make sure you sign.
Yeah, I'll do that right now. I'll do that right now. All right, we'll see you.
Okay, hey, thanks. Okay, that was great,
Great,
great
great.
listening to Dustin. Let's go on to the next. Let's go with the updates. I got a few updates with what we need to, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page on this. Your formula grant has been completed, or for some that's going through that process. I just need two things from that formula grant: is the number. If you guys could all write this down and get that information to me as soon as you can, is that the number of students that you have with the 506 form that you put on the federal grant, and the other part is that the funding that you're going to be anticipating to receive. So if you could write that down, just kind of keep it in the back of your mind as soon as you know, or you have that information. If you could email that to me. Number B is that the STP funding deadline is June the 30th. Last year we had a couple school districts that went beyond the June the 30th, and when that happens, I don't. Sometimes they'll remind me, and the second time they remind me is a little bit more of a heat. The third time they remind me is like walking, they throw me over the coals. So, those feelings I don't like to feel. So if you could spend all your STPD money, then the deadline is June the 30th. There you then, you submit all that information, and you get that reimbursement the following month, I believe. Number C is the student recognition agenda. For those students for those sites that are offering the celebration, the recognition ceremony for your students and families, to justify that funding that you're going to be spending that money on with food, I need an agenda with that. And so far, I've had 5 or 6 agendas that were sent to me. And yeah, I was just reminded the other day from the business office that if we don't have the agenda on file and you spent, your district is going to end up paying for that if there's no justification of an agenda. So it's just kind of a reminder. And if you need help with that, let me know. And number D, let's see, the tribal consultation. This past week, we've had six school districts in the area that had their tribal consultation with the Confederate Tribes of Goshutes. Again, it's in the ESSA plan. It's PL 140 11495 in section 8538 that states that any sites, Title VI sites that receive more than $40,000 annually, that tribal consultation should be recommended, highly recommended, strongly recommended from the OIE. And once you have that documentation with both parties signed. Sent that information to me so I can put it on file, and that would go into my report also. Okay. Now on these A, B, C, and D, do we have any questions? Somebody has their hand raised. Who's the hand in? Who's raising their hand? I
It's
see.
Eddie.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. What's your question?
How do we access the grant for the recognition award? Is there a code?
What was that again, Eddie?
For the awards, the $900, how do we
Yes.
access?
Oh, that comes from your district. That money has already been sent to you with the grants that were given to you guys to your school district. And you probably need to go to your business office and just give them an awareness that you give them that letter also. I think I sent a letter out there that was signed by the deputy superintendent, Dr. Norman. And
Was that sent to the district office also?
it was sent to you. And I can send you another copy and take that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll do that. And get that letter and share it with your supervisor so they'll know what they know where you're going with this, and from there you purchase.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah.
Oh, any other questions before we move on? Okay, thing written down. Okay. And the next item is number 5 is the Navajo language and government classes, and that's Clayton. He'll give us an update on that. The transfer of information grades to Granite School District, and Granite will offer the grades to your sites, and you as a person, you'll send that information to the particular schools, or those schools that are those schools that the students are coming from.
Okay, and also thank you very much for allowing me to share. Yeah, the end is coming already. This spring is short. So everything is this week and this coming Tuesday and the next Tuesday, and we're done. As soon as that last Tuesday is done, I prepare the grades and send it to Granite School District. Unless there's a single student that I make agreement with the school district or something, then I will send it to that school district. But most in Utah, most of the students' grades will go to Granite School District. And then if you need to connect with me right away on a student, I'm open. Just give me an email or even a text, and we'll discuss it, and we'll make sure that works. If there are some students that came to you and said, I took a class a year ago, 2 years ago, is there a grade for this child? I can look at my records. I've got records that go back. So we can submit those along with the current grades also. Other than that, anybody have any thoughts or questions?
Hi, this is Anne Marie Sherman. I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I had a parent ask me if any Navajo language classes are going to be offered during the summer.
That one's hard because most kids are out of school. And so about the only thing I could do on that one is almost like a one-on-one idea. But I've been asked that several times throughout the years, but we've never had a class, that meaning a Zoom class. The only other thing that I'm thinking about is next spring, we'll have a live Navajo government's class 4 Saturdays, 8 hours Saturdays, and it'll be live. It'll probably be in one of the schools in the Wasatch Front. The last time we've done those before the pandemic hit, we did it at, what is that called?
Jordan High School.
Jordan High School. And I really like the live class because there are a lot of participation that we do on that one. And instead of going all through the fall and spring, some students do have a lot of things on their plates, but they might have some Saturdays free. So we get 4 sessions and we get it done in those 4 sessions. So if you have a student that's hasn't taken Navajo governments and would like to do it and can't do it after school because of sports or something, but are interested in that Saturday, we're planning to set that up. All right, so right now there's no summer class that I can see. You'll just have to come back to fall.
Oh.
It's
Have
a south
one
facing
or
wall,
two.
and I'm sure in the winter time it just.
Yeah, let's not.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
Okay. Now, Clayton, how soon?
For
Your
grade-
last class, but
Yeah,
the
my
one
last
with
class.
so both disciplines, they're going to be sent the grades to Granite
Yep.
at the same. Okay, all right, just to make
So
sure that
both-
we're all on the same page and stuff.
For this, actually, there's 3 classes.
Okay,
One for Navajo 1, and then we've created Navajo 2 because there's interest there. So we do have about 6 students taking that this spring. And then there's a Navajo government's class. And all the spring classes will end on the 30th. And then within those last 3 days, or the first 3 days of May, we'll submit the grades.
okay. If you could coordinate, is Becky or Addie on?
Hey,
we
it's
are?
Addie. My
Okay,
camera's not
yeah.
working, but yes, we are planning and expecting to do this. But I think this will go through Becky and her secretary, Amy McCumber. So if you could send it to Becky, I can share her information with you.
Okay.
And then her secretary will work with our district to create those credit letters and send them out to each of the school district coordinators.
Oh, very good, very good. That's good assurance.
Also, if you could CC it to Addie to make sure that
Yeah.
we're
Okay.
all,
That it gets done.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a very
Yeah,
good
sounds
idea.
good.
Especially at the end of the year like this, there's
Yeah.
a lot of things going on and stuff. So
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
So should I expect that in about two to 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. We'll look out for it. Thank you, Clayton.
Yeah, we don't want to go too far into May.
Yeah, the counselors start getting antsy for it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay,
Any other
thank you.
thoughts?
okay.
I have one more question. This is Anne Marie again.
Right.
These classes, can they be used as a fulfillment of a high school credit, or is it
It's an
extra?
elective.
Most of the time, the school district would use it in the students, what do they call it? Not extra.
It's an elective class.
Elective class. It
Yeah.
goes into their electives. And so if there's an elective that they need to fulfill, this will go in there.
Mhm. Just as a reminder that the government class is 0.5
Right.
and the language class is 1 credit because it's almost all year. So
All that means is 1 credit means we try to do more than half a year. And then the 0.5, we can do it within the spring quarter.
Yep.
All
Thank
right,
you.
great. Thank you for your questions. And email me anytime if you got a question or a student that you need to verify. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Clayton.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, the last item is the Urban Indian Center. Is anybody from the Urban? Is Penelope or Ivana? Is she on? If not, we'll adjourn for today, and we'll adjourn until next month. Are there any questions out there? Just to be aware that you do have that HB 30 to make sure that you keep that very, very close, because we don't want to have any issues with the regalia of when we have our students walk through the graduation line and stuff. So keep that close, or you could share that with us, with the principals at your high schools.
Dr.
Okay.
Foster,
Yes.
this is Meredith. I just wanted to ask, I know we have the Lagoon vouchers for the families, and I was wondering, did they stop doing the ones for Title VI staff? Like usually they would give one free so that we could go with our families or students.
Yeah, I think they gave that up. And the information that I send out is the only information that is that's offered. I did ask for that. I guess there was a down enrollment, not down enroll. There was a decrease in attendance, and they like to keep their attendance high, and that's where they get their finances, and to give up a few of those. But this is when I asked that. What that was way back in, I guess in January, when she first emailed me. That's the time I asked, but I can ask again, because the one recently sent information is for this. I mean, that's the most updated, and she sent it along with a promo code. So let me remind myself, and I'll ask her again on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Foster, this is Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Are you going to be coming down and doing audits for the southern part of the state this year, or are you going to push that to next year?
I'm trying to fix my schedule that I can. So far, I think I've done 6 or 7. But I'll let you know on that. My schedule is so it's filling up really fast, because oftentimes that in May, April and May is usually the time that I'm really stretched real thin. So, but I'll let you know on that, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
I got another hand raised. Who was that? Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Dr. Foster. It's Melanie Malin from Weaver School District. I have a question regarding the Earth Connections camp.
Okay.
I have those on my calendar, and I saw that the Thanksgiving Point and Over Creek were going to be like combined. But I'm wondering, how do kids sign up for that? How do I provide information for my families to get signed up for that?
I just got a flyer today. I'm going to review that flyer. What I'll do is I'll send you that flyer. That's going to happen in Logan. That's the closest site. But you're also welcome down to Salt Lake if that. I mean, I'll send those 2 flyers to you.
Great.
But let me review that flyer first, and then we do have. Hopefully, we'll have a planned meeting for next week, with all the sites that are interested. And it's kind of right now it's kind of a slow start, because there's a lot of transition happening. So, but we do have those dates in mind for for certain area. Like in your area, you could probably go both ways and just flip a coin, and this is where you're going to end up. Whichever way you go, I think the mileages are going to probably be about the same.
Okay, so would families like sign up to go? They can
Yeah,
choose,
actually,
or do I
it's the
like say all the district goes to?
willingness to do the Navajo government and Navajo language class really adds to the kids' credits as well as their foundation about the Navajo language and the Navajo government classes. Okay, if there's no other, I'll like to thank you, and we'll see you we'll see you in May, or if I see you soon, then I'll see you. Hey, thanks, people.